Hey guys, this is going to be a speed video with some narration for my Superman drawing. If you guys want to see the full picture, you can click on the link for my DeviantArt in the description. Okay, so when I first started sketching this, I was looking at a reference for just the pose, and a lot of them had Superman screaming, but I decided just to do a regular front, kind of serious looking face. The thing to note here is that I try to keep the eyes small. I think small eyes usually make a character more masculine. And then he has a very sharp chin and jawline. You know, a lot of people like to sketch the face in after they've drawn like the rest of the body, but usually I like to put as much detail into the face before I move on. So for the body, I didn't really bother trying to sketch out the whole body first or anything, because I kind of already knew what the pose was going to look like. So I just drew the upper part here and kind of tried to determine how long Supergirl's legs were supposed to be, and from there that was my reference point for everything else. So after I kind of got the idea that her leg was supposed to be this long, so from her legs I can also draw her torso out like this, and that's where the bend is going to be. And then so that kind of determines where his other hands go. So sometimes you can sketch out, you know, every little detail of, you know, your guidelines and whatnot, but sometimes certain poses and certain situations you really don't need to sketch out so much. You can kind of just make sure you get one thing right and use that as a reference point for everything else. For her head, I had a bit of trouble how her expression was supposed to be. So this part didn't, even in the sketch, didn't really look too great. And luckily, I knew that her cape was going to be drawn down like that, so I could cover up a lot of it, a lot of her hair, and didn't really have to draw too much of that. So the sketching was done with Manga Studio's dark pencil tool, and now after I made it blue, I'm gonna ink over on another layer with the G pen. And this is pretty straightforward here. I'm just using a rather small width and kind of varying my pressure on the tablet. So this part's gonna go by really fast because there's really nothing special to see here. Okay, so for coloring, first thing I did was make my background layer dark so I can really see the colors that I'm laying down. And then every color you see here is going to be its own layer. I'm using the G pen because it gives me a nice opaque, sharp look, which is what I need for my base color layer for each color. Because basically what we're going to do is, as we shade and color over these colors, we're going to be using this base color layer as the source for a clipping mask. So now you can see here for the skin, after I have my base layer for the skin, I make a multiply layer above that, and it's going to be a clipping mask layer, so it's only going to paint in the boundaries within the layer underneath it. So this is just building up. I'm using a brush called OC, which you can download. I have a link in the description. A pretty good brush, low opacity, and you can really build up, and it gives it a kind of Copic marker look. But what I'm using to blend everything is mostly going to be this blender in Manga Studio called Soothing Watercolor, and it works pretty well. The important thing is to know when to blend and when to leave a sharper line. So that kind of is something you just pick up as you do more and more of this. Because you don't want to blend everything and make everything look smooth. You want to keep certain areas a little sharper, and it gives it more definition. So that's basically what I'm doing with all the colors here. I'm just building a multiply layer, clipping mask layer above the base layer, and laying down colors and just blending. Sometimes I'll have a gradient layer. You can see that I did on the blue of Superman, and I'll just do a nice little gradient, and it kind of adds a little bit, it kind of helps add a little bit of depth to the colors. It's just kind of a quick way to do it. You don't have to do it. Sometimes it doesn't always work so well, so you can kind of figure out when you should do that. So the shadows I'm putting down, they're probably not even accurate. The important thing really is that it looks good. I think when you do shading, sometimes you don't really have to do it realistically. You just want to add contrast to certain areas, especially when basically anytime an object overlaps another object, it's always nice to have some kind of shadow, just for contrast's sake. And then certain things I'll have highlight layers, so it's just another layer above. And these are all clipping masks, so that I don't ever have to worry about going outside of the necessary areas. And so the highlights are just basically lighter colors. Sometimes it's white, and you don't want to put too many highlights. You just kind of want to pick certain areas to highlight on the clothes or the skin or the hair. So now what I'm doing now is, you can see the outlines are kind of disappearing, and I'm not erasing anything. what I've done is I've made a clipping mask above the line art layer, and I'm choosing colors to basically change the color of the outlines. And what this does is it gets rid of that heavy black, and so it just gives the look a little more painterly and a little less comic booky. For the background, after placing a dark gradient layer in the back, so the brush I'm using is it's called a Daub, D-A-U-B brush I downloaded online, and it's a really heavy, rough brush. So I'm just using that to kind of lay, and then I'm going to use the soothing watercolor to blend certain areas. And then you can see here that I'm changing the hue of it after I've made it, because I didn't really like how saturated it was. And then after this, it's basically just adding small details, highlights, and different colors here and there. This is the front smoke, so this layer is above everything else. Here's some highlights on the smoke to give it a little bit of contrast. I tried to get a bit of black around the characters so that they could pop a little more and separate them from the background, but I ended up just kind of breaking up the smoke to make it look a little more natural instead of having this black halo around the characters. So that worked out a little better. And then these are just little embers floating around. So nothing too complicated here. It's just a matter of choosing colors that work well and kind of give the feeling that you want. But if you look at the original image, the high-res image, the smoke, the background, it's still very rough and abstract and not a whole lot of detail in them. So, which is what I really wanted anyways, because I'd rather my characters stand out and be the focal point of this. So after getting the background done and looking the way I like, you can see that the characters aren't necessarily really fitting the picture. At this point, I'm using an overlay layer above each color, and I'm just adding this kind of yellow, orange, red tint to everything, and it kind of gives the idea that there's fire around them or whatnot. So you can see that the red tint on the blue clothes makes it look like they're really in the picture. And so at this point, I'm just kind of touching up things, darkening certain parts that I feel should be darkened, adding the tints that I need to. And that tint is, again, is an overlay layer. So now we're gonna go in and do small edits, highlights that I think without this small detail, the picture wouldn't look as good. I'm just basically using a G pen and stroking small yellows, reds, and whites along the picture. And this is all on one layer above everything. I'm just gonna, a little lazy with that, but this effect really adds to the picture, I feel. The small details, I think, that really matter when you make pictures like this. So I'm trying not to overdo it, just certain parts highlighted. And then I decide to darken some areas and add a little bit more highlights to his face. And then her arm in the back, I thought it wasn't dark enough, so decided to edit that a little bit, use some gradients, and then add some burns around the part of their capes. And then now I'm using that rough brush again to put some blood basically on their skins. First I do the rough strokes and blend a little bit, and then I go in with the G pen to do the small finer blood details. And that was basically it. Thanks for watching.